Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling prejudice and discrimination.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is, but we got this.
Yeah.
We have an academic text called UT-3.pdf.
Okay.
And we are going to try to unpack it, go through it.
Sounds good.
So first, let's start with defining these two terms, prejudice and discrimination.
All right.
So prejudice, this text defines prejudice as an attitude
Okay.
that predisposes a person to think, perceive, feel, and act in favorable or unfavorable ways towards a group or its individual members.
Okay, so it's not just the thoughts, it's the way that it can impact your actions too.
Exactly, and that's where discrimination comes in, right?
Right.
So discrimination is the actual behavior, the differential treatment of individuals belonging to a particular group.
So it's like prejudice is the thought and discrimination is the action.
Precisely.
Gotcha.
So we're going to dig into some of the characteristics of prejudice.
Now let's get into it.
One of the first ones that the text brings up is that it's acquired. What do you think about that? What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, it means that you're not born with prejudice.
Right.
It's something that you learn and develop over time.
Yeah, through experience, through influences in your environment.
Through your upbringing, maybe things you see in the media.
Totally. Imagine a child, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, hearing their family make negative comments about, let's say, people of a certain religion.
Right.
And that child may not even fully grasp the complexities of religion yet.
Yeah.
But they're already absorbing that negativity.
Absolutely. They're just soaking it all up like a sponge.
Exactly. And it becomes part of their worldview.
And that can be so hard to undo later on.
Right. And another characteristic is that it is emotional.
Oh, for sure.
It's not just a thought, it's a feeling.
Yeah, it's deeply rooted in our feelings.
Yeah.
Which makes it so hard to combat because you can't just reason someone out of their feelings.
Exactly. And that's why the next characteristic is that it's irrational.
Yeah. Often resistant to any kind of logic or evidence.
Right.
Like, you can present someone with facts that completely debunk their prejudice.
Right.
It's like they just don't want to hear it.
Yeah, it just doesn't compute.
Because their emotions are so strong, yeah.
Yeah. And another thing is that prejudice is, this might sound kind of counterintuitive,
Okay.
but it can be functional.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So meaning it serves a purpose
Gotcha.
for the person,
Okay.
even if it's harmful
Right.
to others. And I was like, how could it possibly be helpful to anyone?
Yeah, how can something so negative actually be beneficial?
The text gave an example of
Yeah,
boosting someone's self-esteem.
right.
So they're putting down another group to make themselves feel better.
Like they need to put others down to build themselves up.
Yeah. It's sad, really.
It is, and another one is that it has no connection with reality.
Oh, I see that all the time.
Bro.
People forming these warped views based on fear or rumors.
Mm.
Right. It's just a complete disconnect.
Not even based on any facts.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So those are some of the characteristics. So we have all these different types of prejudice.
Okay, like what?
The text lists, racial, sex, caste, language,
Language.
religious, political.
Interesting.
Kelman.
So many different ways people can be prejudiced against each other.
Right. But I think for this deep dive, we're going to go deep on just one.
Okay, which one are we thinking?
Let's do language.
Language prejudice, okay.
Yeah, I think that might be
It's something that a lot of people experience but might not even realize it's prejudice.
exactly.
Yeah, it's often very subtle.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it in job interviews where someone is treated differently because of their accent.
Oh, absolutely.
Or customer service if someone is struggling to speak the dominant language.
Ugh, yeah. It's like they're immediately dismissed or treated with less respect.
Right, and that ties into discrimination, right?
Yeah.
Because prejudice is that attitude.
Yeah.
And then discrimination is the actual unfair treatment.
The action that stems from that prejudice. Yeah.
Exactly. So the text explains this. It uses the exchange theory to explain how this happens.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
So it's imagining groups competing for resources
Yeah.
jobs, housing.
Right. The basic necessities.
Exactly. And the group that has more power might create rules or systems that give them an advantage.
So it's not always about outright hatred or malice.
Yeah.
It can also be about protecting your own group's interests, even if it means being unfair to others.
Exactly. And the text gives the example of a business owner refusing service to a minority group can protect their business.
Right.
Not out of personal hatred.
More of a calculated move.
Yeah.
Wow, that's That's a tough one to grasp,
It is.
but I guess it happens more than we realize.
So it's like even without the burning crosses and the yelling slurs,
Yeah, it's not always so in your face.
discrimination can still happen in these like quieter, everyday ways.
Right, in the small detail.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced this?
Um, I, I think so, yeah.
It makes you wonder,
It does.
like, how often does this happen and we don't even realize it?
Yeah, and how do we even begin to address it if it's so subtle?
Right. Okay, so we talked about some characteristics, types, how it leads to discrimination.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground already.
Now let's dig into where it comes from.
Okay, let's get to the root of it.
The text lays out three main sources.
Right, I'm listening.
Status and power structures,
Okay.
historical facts, and situational factors.
So it's a mix of societal influences and personal experiences.
Yeah, like how our past shapes our present.
Makes sense.
So let's start with that first one, status and power.
Right.
I feel like history is full of examples
Oh, absolutely.
of how power imbalances lead to prejudice.
Yeah, like it's a recipe for disaster.
The text gave the example of slavery in the United States.
Yo, right. Such a dark period in our history.
To justify this horrific system, slaveholders created this whole narrative around Black people being inferior.
It's crazy how they twisted reality to fit their agenda.
Right. And it wasn't just personal opinion. It was
Right.
like woven into laws, education, even religious teachings.
So prejudice became institutionalized.
Exactly. It was baked into the very fabric of society.
And the effects of that are still felt today.
It's crazy how these power structures
Yeah.
and the justifications for inequality can linger for generations.
A vicious cycle that's so hard to break.
Okay, next up is historical facts.
Okay, so how can facts contribute to prejudice?
So the text argues that prejudice can stem from actual events, even if those events are misinterpreted or twisted over time.
Okay, I see what you mean.
One example they give is the prejudice against women being seen as physically weak or incapable.
Right, like that stereotype that women are just not cut out for certain jobs or roles.
And it has roots in centuries of women being excluded from physical labor or combat roles.
Because it was deemed unladylike or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't because they were inherently weaker, but because of those social structures that limited their opportunities.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. You limit a group's options for generations,
Yeah.
and then you point to their lack of experience
And use that as proof of their inferiority.
as proof that they're not good enough.
It's messed up.
Okay, so the last source of prejudice the text talks about is situational factors.
Okay, so this is about the stuff that's happening around us right now.
Yes, the elements of our immediate environment that can influence our biases.
Gotcha.
The text lists a bunch of factors, but the one I think is most relevant today is social learning.
Especially with social media being such a big part of our lives.
Think about the constant flow of information, images, opinions you encounter online.
It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Right. And not all of it is good.
No, not at all.
Social media can be a powerful tool
Yeah,
for connection, education,
absolutely.
but it can also be a breeding ground for misinformation and harmful stereotypes.
It's a double-edged sword.
It depends on what you're exposed to.
And how you filter that information.
And those algorithms aren't helping.
Right. They just feed you more of what you already like.
Exactly, creating these echo chambers.
Where you're only exposed to opinions that already align with your own.
And that just reinforces your existing biases.
It's like a self-perpetuating cycle of prejudice.
Okay, so social learning is a big one. What other situational factors does the text mention?
Well, one that feels really relevant right now is job competition.
Okay.
You know, when people feel economically insecure,
Right.
they can be more likely to scapegoat certain groups.
You're blaming them for, like, job losses or a struggling economy.
Exactly. It's easier to point fingers than to address the real systemic issues.
Yeah, we see this play out all the time with immigration debates.
It's a classic case of us versus them thinking.
Right. It's easier to blame outsiders for taking jobs
Yeah.
than to address those complex structural issues that are actually at play.
It's a convenient distraction.
Okay, what else?
So there's also conformity to norms.
Okay.
This is the pressure to fit in.
Right, even if it means going along with harmful views.
It's like you don't want to rock the boat or be seen as different.
Yeah, I've totally felt that pressure.
Oh, me too.
Like laughing along to a joke that's actually kind of offensive.
Just because you don't want to make a scene.
Yeah, just to avoid confrontation.
It's a tough situation to be in.
And lastly, interaction patterns.
Okay, so who we spend our time with can influence our biases.
Exactly. If you only interact with people who share your views,
Right.
those views are likely to become more entrenched.
even if they're not accurate or fair.
It's like those online echo chambers we talked about, but in real life,
Like living in a bubble.
surrounding yourself with people who all think alike can create a false sense of consensus.
And make it harder to challenge your own biases.
Okay, so we've talked about these external factors.
Yeah, the societal influences.
But now let's get into the psychological roots of prejudice.
Okay, so what's going on inside our heads that makes us susceptible to these biased views?
One of the first things the text discusses is frustration and aggression.
So when we're feeling frustrated, we're more likely to lash out.
And often, the target is a group that's already marginalized.
The classic scapegoat phenomenon.
Exactly. It's like when people are angry or upset, they look for someone to blame.
And it's usually someone who's already vulnerable.
It's a sad but common pattern throughout history.
It's easier to target those who are already disadvantaged.
And then the text talks about the authoritarian personality.
This is where things get really interesting.
Right. Like, is there a certain personality type that's more prone to prejudice?
Well, the text suggests that people with certain traits,
Okay.
like rigid thinking, a strong need for hierarchy, and a tendency to submit to authority figures,
Okay.
are more likely to hold prejudiced views.
So it's not a prejudice gene or anything,
Not exactly.
but like a combination of personality and upbringing that might make someone more susceptible.
It's a complex interplay of nature and nurture.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we've gone from the characteristics to the types to the roots.
External factors, psychological roots, it's a lot.
My brain is full.
But I think the big question everyone's wondering is, can we change?
That's the million-dollar question.
Can we actually reduce prejudice?
I sure hope so.
Well, that's what we're going to explore in part 2 of this deep dive.
I can't wait to learn more about that.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, don't go anywhere. Welcome back.
Okay, so we left off on this question of like, can we change?
Did we reduce prejudice? Yeah,
It feels kind of hopeless sometimes.
it can. It's a big problem.
But the text does offer like several methods for reducing it.
That's good. That's good.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
There's hope.
There's hope. So one of the first things they talk about is intergroup contact.
Okay, so getting different groups to interact with each other.
Yeah, but it's not just like randomly throwing people together.
Right. It has to be done in a way that actually promotes understanding.
Exactly. Remember those key conditions we talked about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like equal status between the groups, common goals, those things.
Exactly. It's going to be like genuine interaction, not just forced, awkward small talk.
Real meaningful connection.
Yeah, and the cool thing is this can be applied in so many different areas.
Like where?
Schools, workplaces, community organizations.
Oh, yeah, tons of possibilities.
So the text talked about this thing called a cultural assimilator.
Cultural what?
Assimilator.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't, no.
It sounds pretty cool. It's like this,
What is it?
it's like, I don't know, an empathy boot camp
Oh, interesting.
where people are exposed to different cultures in a structured way.
So they can learn about different traditions and values?
Yeah, step into someone else's shoes.
See the world from a different perspective.
Literally.
It's a powerful idea.
I was thinking, what about actual virtual reality?
Oh, VR.
Could that be used to combat prejudice?
That's actually a really cool idea.
Right.
VR could be amazing for creating empathy.
Because it can literally put you in someone else's shoes.
Like you could experience what it's like to be discriminated against firsthand.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be like abstract.
Right.
It would be like real and personal.
Powerful stuff.
Okay, so we've got intergroup contact, cultural immersion, maybe some VR action.
It's like a plan
What about education?
in the more traditional sense, yeah.
Like, how can schools help in this fight?
Well, the text talks about designing curriculums
Yeah,
that teach kids about diversity from a young age.
not just learning history from one perspective, but like
Multiple viewpoints.
understanding the nuances of different cultures.
Yeah, fostering that sense of curiosity and respect for other cultures.
It's like raising a generation that's more open-minded, more inclusive.
Less likely to fall into those prejudice traps.
Right, and it's not just about the textbook stuff.
No, it's about the whole school environment.
Creating a space where every student feels safe and respected.
Zero tolerance for bullying or discrimination.
Makes sense. It's like all those anti-bullying programs and diversity initiatives in schools.
Yeah, they're definitely on the right track.
It's about creating a culture where prejudice just isn't acceptable.
It sends a clear message.
Okay, what about the media's role in all this?
Ooh, the media is huge.
We talked about how social media can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it can be good or bad.
But what about movies, TV, news, all that stuff?
I mean, the media shapes how we see the world, right?
Right.
So it can either reinforce harmful stereotypes or challenge them.
Yeah, so being mindful of the messages we're consuming is super important.
Absolutely. And it's about demanding more diverse representation in the media.
Not just token characters or stereotypical portrayals, but like
Genuine stories.
stories told by and about marginalized communities.
Giving them a platform to share their experiences.
And that brings up the power of storytelling.
Oh yeah, a good story can change hearts and minds.
More than just presenting facts, it can reach people on an emotional level.
Make you see the world in a whole new way.
Okay, so we've got intergroup contact, education, media representation.
We're hitting all the bases here.
What about the role of governments and social policies?
That's a big one.
Can laws really make a difference when it comes to prejudice?
I think so. The text brings up social legislation,
Okay.
like laws that prohibit discrimination in housing, employment, all those areas.
Can they really change hearts and minds, though?
Maybe not directly,
Right.
but they create a framework
Yeah.
for a more just society.
It's like setting standards and having consequences for breaking those standards.
Exactly. And over time, that can influence how people think and act.
So it's not just about changing individual attitudes.
No, it's also about changing the system.
The systems and structures that perpetuate inequality.
Right. We need to look at the root causes of prejudice.
Examine our laws, policies, institutions, all of it.
Ask ourselves, are these systems fair?
Are they serving everyone equally?
If not, we need to push for change.
Advocate for policies that promote equity.
Hold our leaders accountable.
It's like that quote, be the change you want to see in the world.
It's cheesy, but it's true.
We each have a role to play.
In dismantling prejudice.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, how prejudice works, where it comes from, ways to combat it.
We've done a deep dive for sure.
But what's the next step for our listener?
I think the next step is taking this knowledge and putting it into action.
What does that look like?
It starts with self-reflection.
Acknowledging your own biases.
Yeah, we all have them.
Actively working to unlearn them.
It's not easy, but it's worth it.
And then engaging with the world in a more mindful way.
Pay attention to those subtle forms of prejudice. Speak up when you see injustice.
Support initiatives that promote equality.
And never stop learning.
Keep reading, keep listening, keep challenging your own assumptions.
The fight against prejudice is a marathon, not a sprint.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
I agree.
Thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll continue our deep dive in part 3.
Don't miss it.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into prejudice and discrimination. We've talked about a lot, but I think it's important to remember that this isn't just like an academic discussion, you know?
Right, this is about real people's lives.
It's not just concepts, it's about understanding the impact that prejudice has.
On individuals and communities.
Yeah, on our entire society.
And it can take so many forms.
We often focus on those like really obvious examples like the blatant prejudice.
The shouting and the slurs.
Yeah, but sometimes it's the subtle stuff that can be even more harmful.
The unconscious biases, the microaggressions.
Yeah, like you might not have someone yelling slurs in your face,
Right.
but you experience these little digs, you know?
Yeah, like you're being treated differently somehow.
It's like being constantly underestimated or overlooked.
And those little things, they add up over time.
They can chip away at your self-worth.
Make you feel like you don't belong.
And it's a good reminder that even if we ourselves aren't the targets of prejudice, it doesn't mean it's not happening all around us.
Exactly. We need to be aware of those subtler forms and call them out when we see them.
Yeah, so what can we do to be more aware of those everyday biases, I guess?
Well, we talked about intergroup contact before,
Right, just being around people from different backgrounds?
but it goes deeper than that.
Okay,
It's about meaningful interactions,
right.
building relationships, and truly seeing each other as individuals.
So moving beyond tolerance to genuine acceptance.
Right. Celebrating those differences, but also recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah, and sometimes it means speaking up, right?
Absolutely. Even when it's uncomfortable.
Even if it's just a small thing, like calling out a biased comment.
Yeah, because each time we challenge prejudice, we're creating a ripple effect.
You're making it a little safer for others to do the same.
Exactly.
You know, one of the big things I've gotten from this deep dive is that fighting prejudice isn't just about changing individuals.
Right.
It's about changing systems.
The systems and structures that perpetuate prejudice, yeah.
Like looking at our laws, policies, institutions.
Asking, are these systems fair?
Are they serving everyone equally?
And if not, we need to push for change.
Advocate for policies that promote equity and justice.
Hold our leaders accountable.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
It's cheesy, but it's true.
We each have a role to play in dismantling prejudice.
We can all be part of creating a more just world.
So where do we go from here? We've unpacked so much about how prejudice works, where it comes from,
And some ways to combat it.
What's the next step for our listeners?
It starts with you. Self-reflection, acknowledging your own biases, working to unlearn them.
Engage with the world in a more mindful way.
Pay attention, speak up, support initiatives that promote equality.
And never stop learning.
Keep challenging those assumptions.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
I'm glad we could do this together.
We hope you've learned something new and feel inspired to take action. Remember, even small steps make a difference. We can all be part of creating a more just and equitable world. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content like this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community for more insights into psychology and personal development. Let's grow and learn together. See you in the next video.